Hey everybody, it's Jenny, and I am going to create a scrapbook layout with you today. I am starting by cutting a circle out of this Bella Boulevard Bella Basties oyster gingham patterned paper. That was a lot for one sheet of paper, but I am using the world's oldest tool, which is a colozzle. If you have been paper crafting for a long time, you may remember this bad boy, but seriously, it's from like 2006 or something like that. So not something I can link you up to. However, it still works so wonderfully for me, so I keep on using it. Anywho, I am trimming up two 2x3 photos. I'm using that Tonic paper trimmer, which is my paper trimmer of choice. It works really, really well. I'm going to mat these photos just on some white cardstock. The photos are of an orange tree in my yard. One of them is a little bit closer, showing the blossoms, which is the point of how excited I am about the orange blossoms on the tree in my backyard. So I'm going to use a bunch of Distress Oxide inks today and a stencil and some dies. And these are all from Waffleflower Crafts. And so I am super, super excited to dive in. However, let me start by telling you that I am very, very, very much a beginner to this type of crafting. I know how to blend ink using a brush and a stencil. However, layered stencils and die cutting and all of that, very, very, very new to that. Very much a beginner. Very much enjoying being a beginner, if that makes sense. I love the learning process and the playing process, and there is lots of that here. I wanted to enjoy blending the inks, which is exactly what I do. I love this process. I think it is basically like the most fun for me anyway. So I wanted to do that. So like for right there, for example, you can see how I did some of those flowers. Really, you layer them on top of each other, but I wanted to layer them out to try out some ink colors and see like how they performed like next to each other, so I could get kind of an idea of how they would work together, like on top of each other. So I just blended those out on that paper because gosh darn it, I really have a good time with that. So for these leaves, I'm just using the cracked pistachio in varying amounts of ink. So the darker portions are just several layers of the cracked pistachio, and the lighter is a very light hand of one layer of the cracked pistachio. So I just really wanted it to be very tone on tone. So then I'm going to cut these out using the dies, the Waffleflower dies that match the stencil. There aren't actually any stamps that go with this, which I love stamping, but I find that blending the inks like this is like coloring in a coloring book, if you enjoy coloring, of course. Like it's just fun. You're just playing. You're blending out colors. It's a good time. And then if you're using Distress Oxides, for example, that you really enjoy that color, it's great fun. And this entire layout took longer than it probably needed to, but I enjoyed every last moment of it. So you can see I'm just sending this back through my die cut machine several times so that I can get the leaves and the flowers and all of that right there. And I just think this whole thing is beautiful. Like this sort of watercolory painted flower idea is exquisite. Now, what I wanted to do for this big one, so instead of using this stencil, I wanted to try just blending ink on the paper. Please remember at this point how much I'm enjoying this when I'm doing this. Like I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is so fun. I could blend ink all day. So I wanted to do that and then just cut it out, not even use the stencil for the biggest one. I thought that it would just be fun to try because as I said, I am very much a beginner at all of this. And I figured that why not give it a go? Like I don't I don't have to do it any which way. I can do it any way I want to. So I thought that that would be really very much a good time, and I definitely enjoyed it a lot. So now you can see I will just cut those out, and it turns out great. And I really wanted it to be varied. Like, I didn't want the ink to be one solid color because, quite frankly, I could have just used cardstock then, right? I wanted it to be varied. I wanted it to be slightly lighter in some places and a little bit darker in the others, just so it would have some of that dimension and depth and really have that sort of painted floral. If you're enjoying this, I will link these up for you below. I honestly can see this being a set that a person could use like forever because it's just such a good time, like so enjoyable, and it just requires ink essentially. So I'm just doing this repeatedly with lots of different colors. So you saw where I was doing it with the spun sugar, and then I'm now going to be doing it with this lilac. I think that's the color. I don't know. I'll link it up below. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I am really excited about all of these colors together. First of all, I love pastels. And then second of all, they just really, really, really feel like spring to me. And that was exactly what I wanted because this is my orange tree or mandarin tree in the spring. So I thought that that was just very fun. I'm also going to do this in this might be called broken glass. It's definitely something glass. And use that like this with the blue too. Again, look at that. It's just so pretty. So like I'm super giddy like even talking to you about this because I know how much I enjoyed this overall process, and I'm super excited to share that with you. And I'm also really excited to share with you the thought process of being a beginner too, because nobody starts a hobby and is like, oh my God, I'm super good at this, like straight out the gate. Like there is just a lot of practice and trial and error and getting better involved. And I am really enjoying having a hobby where I am a beginner because I do lots of hobbies and hobbies that I've been doing for years and years and years and years and years. And so I'm definitely not a beginner. But in this, I'm absolutely a beginner, and it's just fun to be. So I look forward to playing with this more and trying different ideas and techniques. Now, as we stated at the beginning, I am making a scrapbook layout with these as opposed to a card because I think that, at least for me, these types of supplies I would typically see as card making supplies, which is wonderful, but I wanted to use them for a scrapbook layout about those photos of my mandarin tree. So we'll see how they all come together in the end, but it's definitely an enjoyable process, that's for sure. All right, so now I'm going to first clean off the stencil. So I want to get the excess ink off so that I don't blend that into my individual florals, which you definitely don't have to do. I just thought that was a good idea. And then I also just used the same supplies that I use for cleaning my stamps. So I do that microfiber cloth and I use the stamp cleaner, and I just used the exact same thing and it turned out really well. Now I am taping down the stencil and the flower, which, newsflash, is kind of stupid because I actually have an Altenew little sticky grippy mat thingy and I could just be using that, but I forget completely about it until a little bit later when I pull it out. So you do get to see it and you do get to see me use it. But for right now, I just completely forgot that I had it. So I'm taping all my things down and adding the ink that way, which is fine. You know, obviously this works very much so. But obviously the little sticky mat would work a little bit better. So we're just layering the different parts of the stencil. So like there's the main part, and then there's a couple of different petals, like parts for adding different shades for the petals, and then there is a part for the center, and then there's also parts for the leaves too. So it's, I don't want to say a fairly involved stencil because I'm sure there are others that are more involved, but I mean, it kind of is. I mean, there's definitely several parts to it. And as I already told you, I had a whole lot of fun playing with this and enjoying the process of just simply blending out inks. As I already said, I will link all of these things for you below in case you're curious about any of them or you could see yourself using them. There it is, the little Altenew sticky mat thingy-mabobby that's going to help me not have everything slip sliding away. It's basically just like a big stamp, and you're putting the things down on the smooth side versus the bumpy side. And it's freaking awesome. It's not going anywhere. And in the end, it's so easy to clean off when you get a little bit of ink on there. Now I wanted to just practice and see, for example, like using the pale spun sugar on the top, like could I see it? Did I like the effect? That type of thing. Obviously I didn't, so I added the pickled raspberry on the top and it worked out fine. Now I'm also blending out some of the edges of the ink. To me, this is very much like blending makeup, like eyeshadows or foundations or things like this, which I also really, really enjoy the blending of those things as well. So I just wanted to blend out the edges and do it in a way that made it all feel really seamless, like there was no harsh transitions at all. And so I'm just repeatedly blending out those edges. I started, of course, because I got little bit of the darker pink on the lighter pink and that I didn't want to be there. So then I started blending that out, and then I wanted to blend out the edges that were still white. And I very much got carried away. But when I say that, I also very much enjoyed doing it. So, I mean, I don't think that's a negative, to be honest. All right, so let's do it again. Let's add the center because now I learned that I really do need the darker color. So we've got the 3 different shades of pink. We've got that pale spun sugar. We've got the kitsch flamingo, and then we've got the pickled raspberry. And then like I said, I'm just blending out the edges so that there aren't any harsh edges. And then there aren't any little white pieces either that are peeking out from the where the stencil and the die like didn't meet up properly. So I'm just using these smaller, finer brushes to do that and enjoying every last moment of it and not considering it a negative whatsoever. So now I'm just going to clean this off real quick. I'm spraying some stamp cleaner spray, wiping it with my microfiber cloth and getting the excess ink off just to make sure that, again, I don't get, like, for example, pink ink right here on this blue flower, which again wouldn't be the end of the world if I did, but I don't want to, so I'm going to just keep it so that I don't. So look at that. There's a little bit of variation. There's a little bit of depth with those different kinds of colors. You can imagine shadows and layered pieces and things like that. And then I'm going to also just ink the edges ever so slightly to make them a little bit darker because, again, I like the varied different colors to make it look a little bit more realistic and have dimension. So now I can put that little mat away because I am finished working on that. Now I am going to cut out another circle just out of cardstock that I am going to use as a template for where I'm going to add some stenciled flowers directly on the cardstock. You'll see this in a minute, to layer those die cut florals. So I just want to give myself a template directly on my page. So that's what this cardstock circle is for. So I'll use a pencil and just trace the outline of this circle real quick, which is one size smaller than my patterned paper, so that these florals can layer underneath the patterned paper. So then when the pattern paper is on top of it, you don't see the bottom edges. And then the florals the die cuts that you already saw me cut and blend and things like that, can just layer on top of these that I'm going to put directly on the page. The purpose of this is to make it just look like there are multiple layers of these florals. So more like a bouquet or that kind of thing versus it just being like, oh, here's one line of the flowers right here. Now on this one, I did not move the yellow, or didn't wipe the yellow off of the stencil. And I feel like it definitely makes it look a little bit more peachy, which I guess I don't even actually really care. It doesn't even bother me all that much. But that is definitely one of the negatives of not cleaning off the stencil, is how it does affect the color a little bit. I love how those colors look together. They're so pretty and they definitely feel like spring. So I just wanted to kind of give those a little bit of a layout on the page so then I could figure out how I want to configure these that are directly on my cardstock so that they peek out ever so slightly. And again, I do not want these to be perfect. I just want to continue to make that abundantly clear. I want them to be sort of varied in darkness because I want them to look not perfect. I want them to look, more like watercolor, or there's line or light hitting them, or, any number of things, but not just one solid color, because if I did want that, I could just have cut these out of cardstock and glued them down. I did not want to put the blue on top of the purple. I wanted it to appear that the blue was layered behind the purple. So I'm just using that smaller brush to use on that last little leaf of the stencil so that I could keep the purple appearing like it's on top. So there we go. It looks fairly plain and not particularly interesting. Then we add the patterned paper directly on the top, which is a white and pale gray gingham. And then we're going to layer the die cuts on the top. So I'm just obsessed, honestly, with how this turned out. I think it just looks so pretty and exactly what I was hoping for, in that A, the design was what I envisioned, B, that the florals have the look that I wanted. They're not perfect. They definitely look very, very watercolory and all of that, which I absolutely love, especially because I didn't use watercolor. I used ink and had a lot of fun blending those out. So now those are all adhered. I'm just going to trim off the excess that is ever so slightly hanging off the edge because I wanted this all to sit flush with the edge of the paper. And then I'm going to add my photos, which I'm going to layer behind the die cuts, over the die cuts, on top of each other, behind each other, all of that, and have them a little bit tilted, if you will. I can't think of a little askew, a little tilted, just to make them feel a little more whimsical also. Now these stickers, they're a little bit older. They might be from the Paige Evans Blooming Wild collection. I don't remember, but I'll link them up below. These are honestly some of my most favorite stickers basically ever. I love them. I love the font. I love the colors. I love the multiple colors on each one. And so I'm using these for my title, and I absolutely am just so impressed with how well they sort of blend together with the flowers. Like the whole thing comes together so seamlessly, and I'm just absolutely in love with how that turned out. So yeah, I could not be any happier than I am. Now, doing this and not being able to see the edge of the circle is a little bit more difficult, so you will see me struggle with that a little bit. I ultimately just bring that template back out and sort of try to follow that a little bit to get the circular angle. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect because I can't see that other circle and I don't have one cut out like that, but the template gives me a much, much better idea of how it should be going in the circle. So as soon as I pull that out, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. But I think that it just really turned out so pretty, and I love the floral. I love the circle, all of it. The layering is just so much fun and really feels bright and springy, that's for sure. So now I'm going to add a Prima little flower there down at the bottom in the, like right by the S, in between the two and the leaves, and that's it. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I really do appreciate it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the box below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you so much and make it a great day.